Welcome back to Homesteading with the Zimmermans, where we work hard and play hard on our little corner of land in Iowa. My husband and I were born and raised Old Order Mennonite, or horse and buggy Mennonite, as some refer to them as. And although we are no longer part of that culture or community, we are intentional about passing on the old-fashioned skills of our childhood to the next generation. Well, here I am, guys, doing what I said I wouldn't do, and that is putting tomatoes in the freezer. But I have 2 nice buckets full of tomatoes, and it is Saturday afternoon, and our family's preparing to host some guests tomorrow on Sunday, and I know I'm not going to get around to these tomatoes, and they need to be used. They were picked like a week ago, half a week ago, so here I am. Getting them ready for the freezer. I'm just going to rinse them and take the tops off, cut any bad spots off, put them in Ziploc bags and put them in the freezer. So I'm just going to wash the tomatoes and take off any bad spots, take out the cores, just as if I was getting ready to turn them into sauce or ketchup or anything on my list. And some of the bigger ones I am going to cut in half. But most of the paste tomatoes or aromas, I am just going to leave whole. I'm just washing those and taking the tops off. Those do not need to be cored. All right, Harrison, how many bags do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bags of tomatoes. Well. Hello everybody, it is now Monday morning and it is time for me to deal with all of these tomatoes. So ideally, to get started with processing them on Monday morning, I would have taken them out of the freezer last night. But we had guests last night, and after the guests left, we did a little bit of cleaning up and I went straight to bed and didn't think about my tomatoes until this morning. And yes, Tuesday is another day, but my sisters and I, because my mom is visiting, my sisters and I made plans to get together on Tuesday and visit with mom before she goes back home. So that means tomatoes need to be processed today, because tomorrow I want to go and take the day off and hang out with my sisters. So first thing I did when I got up is I got them all out of the freezer and laid them here. And now what I'm going to do to speed up the process is I'm going to put them all in hot water and hopefully speed up the thawing process. Otherwise, if you just let them set out for about 12 hours, you're ready to start processing them. So now we're just going to let these set in warm water and I'll keep my eye on them and see how fast they're defrosting. And I might drain the water, and when the water cools off, I might drain it and add more hot water. And it looks like they're floating because there's air in the bags. I don't know how much good this will do, but let's see how much air I can let out of the bags. So now, while those defrost, I'm just going to go about the rest of my day, or the rest of my morning. I'm going to hang all the laundry to dry and just kind of catch up from our weekend. So it's been about 2 hours since I put my tomatoes in warm water, and you may think that this water got into the bag from the tomatoes being in the water, but it in fact did not. And one of the reasons when I decided to freeze these tomatoes, one of the reasons I decided to turn them into ketchup is when you thaw your frozen tomatoes, they will release a lot of their liquid. And one of the reasons, I have pepper seeds in here. One of the methods, or the method that I use for making ketchup, is you have to cook it down for quite a while to thicken it, because all of this liquid has to evaporate and cook off. However, when you freeze your tomatoes and thaw them, you are getting rid of a lot of that liquid. So we're just going to strain all the liquid off. So then, I'm not sure how this is going to work. We're going to strain the tomatoes, the thawed tomatoes, strain all the water off of them, and then we're going to blend them. Okay, so there's one thing I've noticed. The tomatoes that I cut definitely lost a lot more liquid than, like, say, the Romas that I left whole. Because this one feels like a water balloon. It literally feels like it's holding all its water. So what I'm doing is just busting those here in the strainer. I'm just busting those paste tomatoes and helping them remove their liquid. And then I'm just moving them around in my strainer a little bit to try to get rid of as much liquid as I can. And I've learned, don't make my blender too full, because otherwise it won't blend all of the peels. So for every 1 gallon of tomato juice that I have, I need 1 onion. And so I now have 1 gallon of tomato juice blended approximately. So I'm going to add an onion to this next batch in the blender. Also, the Romas, the paste tomatoes, they have a lot less liquid in them, which is typical of what we expect from paste tomatoes. And that is why they're my favorite, is because they're a lot less watery than varieties that you plant. If you've been here a while, you know that I have brothers and sisters that grow produce commercially, and they take it to the Mennonite auction, where retailers then buy big lots and take it to their retail stores. And the kinds of tomatoes that they like are not the kind of tomatoes that I want in my garden. And here's why. They like the varieties of tomatoes that are firm and they ship well. So basically what they can do is they can pick them when they're just starting to turn, and then they run them through their washers and they pack them in boxes, and then, or I should say, they run them through their polishers, and then they pack them in boxes while they're still just orange. And these tomatoes stay solid and they don't break down. And excuse me. And this allows for them to, like, they have a pleased customer at the very end, right? So because the tomatoes stay solid and they don't break down, the wholesale buyer is pleased and the retail buyer is pleased. And those are the tomatoes that you're bringing home from the grocery store, and you're still keeping them on your counter or in your refrigerator for a couple weeks before they start breaking down. So that's a completely different tomato than what I want. I want a tomato that I can let on the vine until it's ripe, and then when I pick it, I want it to be real meaty and juicy. When I have bought canning tomatoes from my brothers or somebody that grows them commercially, and I've bought them, I have ended up with a lot less end product because there was so much water in those tomato varieties that they grow for shipping. So I always look for a paste tomato or an heirloom variety tomato. I want to stay far away from anything that the commercial growers want, or anything that says it stays nice and solid during shipping. So that is the one of the benefits of being able to grow my own tomatoes, is that what I have is normally what I end up with product, because there's a lot less water in paste and heirloom tomatoes than there is in shipping tomatoes. Anyway, that's my experience on the different tomato varieties that I have used, and I've even fielded some comments and questions on my social media, people saying my tomatoes had so much water and it took me forever to cook down my pasta sauce. My question to those people that are asking those questions would be, what variety did you plant, or where did you get your tomatoes? Because very likely if you're buying canning tomatoes from a grower, they are growing shipping tomatoes. And the reason they're labeled canners is because they're just not perfect enough to sell or ship to their wholesale buyers. Okay, so we are ready to blend this onion. Let me put my vase back. With this batch of tomatoes. So I plant some heirloom varieties, but mostly I plant the Amish paste or aroma tomatoes because we don't eat a lot of sliced tomatoes during the summer. But the one thing is, your Amish paste tomatoes or your aroma tomatoes, you need more. Like, they're definitely, like, when you pick them, it takes a lot of tomatoes to fill your bucket. But that's okay. I don't mind, if I have to pick a lot of tomatoes. And you can hear how much more water was in that bag of tomatoes than in the Romas. So there, I'm adding my second onion for my second gallon of tomato juice. All right, last onion. So for every 1 gallon of tomato juice, I'm going to add 1 hot pepper, jalapeno. Those are hot. I just inhaled some of the vapor of those hot peppers. But anyway, 1 clove of garlic and 1 hot pepper per gallon of tomato juice. These hot peppers were rated not as hot as the jalapenos, so I'm trusting they're not as hot, but you can adjust your hot peppers according to what you think your family will like. Or you can just use, for every 1 gallon of tomato juice, you can use 1/8 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. And if you don't have fresh garlic cloves, you can use 1/4 teaspoon of, you can use 1 teaspoon of garlic powder per gallon of tomato juice. So I've got a little bit of tomato juice in here, and then I threw my garlic and hot peppers in here. So for every gallon of tomato juice, you want 1 cup of apple cider vinegar. And I'm going to say I have 3 gallons of tomato juice, so I need 3 cups of vinegar. And the reason I'm pouring it into my blender is because I want to make sure I'm going to use the vinegar to wash the blender. That way I don't have as much tomato puree and veggie puree going down my drain. And there we go, washed up my blender. Here I am with a whole bunch of nice thick tomato juice. I am going to put it in the roaster, and I'm going to start cooking it. You could easily put this, okay, so here's where you can go. You can turn this into pasta sauce. So just, you would proceed, and I'll link my pasta sauce video. You would proceed with adding your ingredients and cooking it down. And you may not even have to add tomato paste if you do this. Just cook it until it's as thick as you like. And remember, when you run it through the blender, there's going to be a transition period where it heats and the foam disappears and it is going to shrink. So you could turn this into pasta sauce now. I'm going to turn it into ketchup. You could put it into a pot and babysit it a little more. I have to be gone for a couple hours after lunch. That's why I'm putting it in the slow cooker. But whenever you are making pasta sauce or ketchup, whenever you're trying to reduce something and remove the excess moisture and liquid, you want to cook it with the lid off. And if you are making pasta sauce, and I wish I would have remembered to talk to you about this through some of my other canning videos, but I really need to mention the importance of having a heavy bottom stock pot, because the heavier the bottom is, the more the heat distributes evenly, and the less trouble you're going to have with scorching when you reduce something and you're simmering it for a long period of time. So if you keep having trouble with scorching when you're canning, you will need to check the bottoms of your stock pots. I guarantee you they're probably not heavy enough. The heavy bottom stock pots, and I'll look at what brands I have, and because they've mostly thrifted, a few were wedding gifts, mostly thrifted, but I will try and find those for you and link them, my favorite brands, but any brand will do as long as it has a real heavy bottom. Okay, we've got our vinegar and our tomatoes and onions and garlic and hot peppers. Now it's time to add our spices. So we need 1 tablespoon of salt per per gallon of tomato juice. And remember to taste and adjust as you go. And I'm just kind of guesstimating that I have 3 gallons of tomato juice because, like I said in earlier videos, when I use the blender, everything gets foamy. And so I always err on the side of less. Even though it might measure 4 gallons, by the time the foam all dissipates, I think I would be down to about 3. So I'm going to be adjusting my spices as I go. So there's the salt. So the next thing is cinnamon. You need 1 teaspoon per gallon. I'm going to go light on that for now. I don't want to put too much cinnamon in. And you need 1 teaspoon of ground cloves per gallon. And I'm going to go light on that as well, because I can always add more if I want to. I can't really take it out. Also going to add 1 teaspoon of ground black pepper per. I know my family likes the flavor of black pepper, so I'm not going to go light on the black pepper. You need 1/2 cup of brown sugar per 1 gallon of tomato juice. And here again, go on the light side first, because you can always add more if you feel like you need to make it sweeter. So now we're just going to let this cook without a lid for at least an hour before we come back and taste it. And I have my roaster turned to about 300 because I'm going to be around here. When I leave the house, I'm going to turn it much lower. What do you think? Okay, we are back home, and I have turned this back up to about 400. I want to get it to a good rolling boil, and I'm going to add my thickening agent now. What I'm using is Clear Gel or Permaflow. That's what I'm using. I will link options for you, and whatever you would use to thicken your canned pie filling or things like that, you can use in your ketchup. So what Clear Gel is like a modified cornstarch, and I'm using 1/2 cup of Clear Gel per 1 cup per 1 gallon of tomato juice. And then we're going to add cold water to this. And you need twice the amount of cold water as you have Clear Gel. You're going to mix your Clear Gel and water mixture together until it's all dissolved. And I'm just going to wait a little bit until I add it, because I want this at a full boil. Make sure you put your laundry away, Harrison, okay? Okay, so I'm gonna add this clear gel. I'm gonna stir it in real well, and then we're gonna let this cook. If it were in a pot, in a kettle on the stovetop, I would say probably another hour, but because I've just got it in my roaster, it's probably gonna be a little more than an hour, because a roaster like this or a slow cooker is slower than on your stovetop. Maxwell, you got that water taken down? Okay, it's probably time for you to take your laundry up now. So we're just going to bring that back to a boil and let it simmer. Okay, our ketchup has cooked down for about an hour now, and it has gotten really nice and thick, and I'm happy with the flavor. So we're going to can our ketchup with what we call open kettle canning, where you bring your product to a simmer and you ladle it into jars, and then you put your warm lids on and turn it tight, and it will seal. As the product cools off, it'll create enough of a vacuum so that it should seal. Now I'm canning my ketchup in pints, mainly because I'm very, very low on quart jars, but I have lots of pint jars left. Hadassah, I'm gonna need your help here for the open kettle canning. Can you come here? So you're gonna put, as soon as I'm done, you're gonna put a hot lid on and turn it tight, okay? So having the lids warm, make sure that the rubber on the lids is very soft, and this will help create a more secure seal as the product cools and creates the vacuum. So if you're not comfortable with this method of open kettle canning, just ladle your hot ketchup into jars and water bath them for about 10 minutes. And I would do the same amount for pints or quarts if I was water bathing my ketchup. So if you have trouble with your ketchup turning too dark, almost like caramel-like, then do not add the sugar until just before you thicken your ketchup, because what's happening if your ketchup gets too dark is that your sugar is caramelizing. And if you are using a kettle or a stock pot instead of a slow cooker, this is much more likely to happen. The slow cooker is a much slower method of using ketchup, and I much prefer doing it in the slow cooker because as your ketchup thickens, it's really hard not to scorch it in a stock pot. Okay, so I was going to film the family trying this ketchup, and mornings are just not a great time for us to film. So they'll use a lot of ketchup on their eggs consistently, and they used it. And my two biggest ketchup critics would be my husband Alvin and our youngest son Harrison. Like, they love ketchup, so they're gonna be the biggest critics. The rest of us are kind of like, well, ketchup is ketchup, And they said that it's much better than the last batch of ketchup I made a couple years ago. And Elvin said, it'll do in a pinch. And Harrison said, it's not too bad, Mom. So that is an improvement. So if you watched my Cooking 101, you know that this is something I do to help my family get used to, new foods or homemade versions of their beloved store-bought versions. And I will add the homemade version with the store-bought version and mix it together. and slowly help their taste buds adapt. And I've done this for ranch, and the thing is, our homemade versions don't have any flavor enhancers in them, any artificial flavor enhancers. So what the family is missing, and they don't know it, is that wow, that flavor enhancer that is in a lot of condiments. So it takes time to wean them off of that. So slowly mixing things in like this, if you have picky eaters like I do, this can help. So, and then the other thing is, I never expect them to change abruptly. Like if I find that this recipe, like they're accepting of it, I will change slowly, and it might take, you know, a year or 2 years to slowly switch them over to only using homemade ketchup, kind of like ranch. We did that for a long time, where we'd mix half store-bought ranch, half homemade ranch, and now it's an extra special treat if we buy homemade ranch, because if we buy store-bought ranch, because we so seldom buy store-bought ranch. So my homemade ketchup got so nice and thick, and this was in the refrigerator, so it's set up really well. So I have to push it down through. Okay, so we're just gonna mix this all together. Here's what I can tell you about your homemade ketchup. Do not skimp on the vinegar or the onion salt. And remember, the printable recipe is in the description, and I will have all my notes in there. But vinegar is what gives ketchup that zing, and the onion salt is what really makes it taste like ketchup. So don't skimp on either of those two ingredients. Okay, so the children brought all the ketchup down here for me, and I need to find room because they just put them on the floor. There was no room. All of my jars sealed with doing the open kettle canning. And I need to make room, and what I'm going to make room with is I pickled some onions, canned some pickled onions a couple years ago, and nobody is really loving them. So we're going to get rid of those, and we're going to put our ketchup here on that shelf. So one of the questions when I briefly shared on Instagram that I was making ketchup, and the question came up, what are you using to thicken it? And I use a clear gel, or like a modified cornstarch. And somebody said, well, that's not a non-GMO ingredient. And I'm well aware of that, but if you eat out even once a week, let's say at Panda Express, you are eating way more GMO ingredients than my family ever will with eating a little bit of corn, a little bit of clear gel in their ketchup on their eggs every morning. So the other way that you could thicken your ketchup is just by, boiling it, cooking it until it's as thick as you like, or just eat it more thin. If that's something that you're okay with it, just eat it on with a thinner consistency if you don't want to thicken it. You could do some research with arrowroot powder. I know some people thicken their canned goods with arrowroot powder. I don't have any experience with that because I really like the clear gel or the PermaFlow, and I will link that because I get it at our Mennonite bulk food stores. It is available online for those of you that do not have access to the Mennonite bulk food stores or a bulk food store. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this week's ketchup video. Thank you everybody for being here, and we will see you next week.